Can I welcome Mike O'Grady, Deputy Head Organised Crime Operations North from HMRC Fraud Investigation Service, Simon York, Director, HMRC Fraud Investigation Service, Deputy Chief Constable Drew Harris from the Police Service of Northern Ireland, and Assistant Chief Constable Stephen Martin, Head of Crime Operations Police Service of Northern Ireland. You're all very welcome, and we are extremely grateful to you for giving up your valuable time to meet with us today so that we can take evidence formally from you as the Select Committee on exiting the European Union. Now, I wanted to kick off by asking, and perhaps to Mr. Martin or Mr. Harris, on our visit to Dublin earlier in the year, we heard concerns that any new or visible border checks would provide an opportunity for those who are not reconciled to the peace and would wish to disrupt it to do things that they are not doing currently. And I wanted to ask, what is your assessment of that risk if we don't continue to have a border where people can cross and goods can move without any checks whatsoever? What is the degree of risk and how concerned are you about it?
Well, we know what the UK government's stated position has been about no infrastructure. If there's no infrastructure, then there's nowhere for protest, damage, criminal damage, or indeed terrorist attack. But obviously, violent dissident Republican groups see this as an area which is contentious, which will give them, in effect, a further rallying call to try and engender support and try and drive their recruitment. And so it is of concern. We know from information that we have that they have a focus on this. They see it as an opportunity, but that is for ourselves and our partners in Garda Síochána and MI5 to cope with, to deal with, and to thwart their in fact terrorist enterprises.
Now, clearly, with no border at the moment, the activities that they are engaged in, there isn't anything in relation to the border that they can direct that to. They're obviously involved in other activities that we hear about from time to time.
Well, we still have a severe terrorist threat here in Northern Ireland.
Indeed.
And indeed, in this year, there's been 4 attempts on the lives of police officers, and we've had numerous shooting and bombing incidents here as well. So 58 shooting incidents and 33 bombing incidents this year alone. So there is a threat. It doesn't often make it into the national press, but that threat exists. It's how then we manage any further growth in that threat. And very positive in that is that the UK have said that there will be no infrastructure in the border, because that would have been an obvious point for dissident groups to rally themselves around and to, as I say, attack, but also try and engender support and sympathy in local communities and further afield.
Well, I mean, as you say, the terrorist threat is very real. But if there were any infrastructure or any people or any places where vehicles had to be checked, then clearly the people doing that would need to be protected, and that would have implications for you and your colleagues.
Well, yes. Well, we work closely with other law enforcement agencies on the island, so both cross-border and the other UK agencies, so National Crime Agency and obviously HMRC and the Border Force. But we work at the moment, and I think we tend to work going forward as well. It would be our firm intention to base our operations on intelligence, planned operations, coordination then with our sovereign counterparts to make sure that those operations can happen securely and safely, not only for the public, but also for our staff, law enforcement staff, but also in a way which is done with the community impact in mind. We want to act in a way which engenders community support for our actions in dealing with unlawful activity.
If I may just add to supplement what the Deputy has said. So there is a severe threat, which means an attack is highly likely. Yep. There have been a number of national security attacks in Northern Ireland this year. Whilst the dissident Republican groups that we're currently facing do not have the capability or capacity that the provisional movement would have had during the Troubles, they have demonstrated their ability to kill people.
Yep.
So I think if there was infrastructure such as you described, whether that be buildings and people, that re-emphasised the border in that physical, tangible, visible way. I think it's highly foreseeable that dissident Republicans would seek to take action against that, and that could include attacking the buildings and the people.
That's very clear and very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Stephen Timms.
Can I just follow up on that point? Suppose it was just cameras. What do you think? Would that be readily manageable?
Well, we already have an extensive automatic number plate recognition system within Northern Ireland, and unfortunately it does get subject to regular criminal damage attacks. So I would envisage that any infrastructure will face some form of threat, but and we obviously would have to manage that. But if we place infrastructure, it's very clear from what we know of their intentions that in some shape or form it would be subject to attack.
You spoke very clearly about how you had a blended approach to organised crime. I was very interested to know from your point of view what elements of the UK's existing criminal justice and law enforcement cooperation with the EU you would say you currently rely on for your cross-border operations.
So that's a really important point for us. As I said earlier, organised crime and the sort of serious fraud we deal with is increasingly and almost always international in nature to some degree. So we use a range of ways of cooperating and collaborating with those outside the UK, whether that's in the EU or beyond. But a number of the processes and conventions that we use with EU member states we use a lot, they're very useful, and without them we would be significantly less effective.
What would be the ones you are using?
So things like the European arrest warrant. So that certainly allows us to bring fugitives, for example, back much more quickly than extradition. We have something called
the... What sort of difference can it make in terms of time for you?
Really significant differences I haven't got those figures in front of me in relation to mainland Europe, but it can be, years, and certainly in terms of numbers. So we have significantly more people in Ireland, for example, brought from the south to the north under European arrest warrants than ever happened with extradition. But we also have something called the Naples II Convention, which is a convention between customs organisations in Europe. That allows us to share intelligence with EU member states. So of all types, so that might be, to use Mike's example from earlier, there's a ship arriving in Dublin that's got illicit tobacco on it, and you might want to pick it up, or whatever, it might be quite specific like that, or more general. And it also allows us to seek assistance. So we might, for example, be able to ask the Dutch to do something for us in Holland, arrest people or search premises or whatever, obtain documents, and they can ask us as well. So there's a range of things like that. We also have mutual recognition of restraint and confiscation, which is quite important. So if we've got judgments in the UK, for example, on confiscation orders, that will be recognised in European member states. So that makes it easier to get hold of criminal assets that have been taken outside of the UK. So a whole range of really useful measures that we're using on a regular basis.
And just to check, I just probe slightly further on that. So just to ask again. What information sharing systems you have, for example, the European Criminal Records Information System, and how you access those. Do you access them jointly, or do you have different operations north and south?
I haven't got all the detail of that. Certainly some things will be sort of HMRC specific, like the Naples II thing. That's a customs thing. Most of the other things I mentioned are law enforcement wide. Sometimes we have individual access to those, and sometimes one agency will do that on behalf of others, I think.
I wonder if Mr. Harris or Mr. Martin would like to come in on this point.
Certainly. So we would also highlight the European arrest warrant, very important for both the speedy removal of suspects to other nations, but also bringing suspects to this nation. And I think to Northern Ireland, last year we were engaged in 69 European arrest warrant movements of individuals. We would also access then the Schengen Information System. That's a very important system for us. We use it at our ports, and so just addressing the point around human trafficking, one of the issues about the common travel area is that it is important to be able to identify really dangerous individuals moving through Ireland into Northern Ireland, and then maybe want to use the ports. And so we put a lot of emphasis on that, and last year we stopped over 700 people on the basis of checks at ports.